outsourcing of personnel and animal welfare, and audits on government efficiency, with the committee that covers the issue and the committee that deals with the audits jointly. We'll ask that someone come up representing Animal Services and representing the Controller's Office, and we'll ask the Controller's Office first and then Animal Services to give us a general overview, and then I would suggest that because the audit is so comprehensive that to make things easier as we go forward, our questions will be on the individual findings as they were discussed in the executive summary. So let's start with...
Why don't we mention who's here for the committee?
Oh, and yes, and we have two committees with a quorum present. First, Audits and Government Efficiency. Do you want to...
Councilman Zine, Councilman Rosendahl. I understand Mr. LaBonge will not be here. And then Personal Animal Welfare Committee, Mr. Kretz.
We have myself, Councilmember Kretz, Councilmember Zine, and Councilmember Alarcon. And so,
Not yet.
so let's start with the controller's point of view on the audit, and then we'll ask Brenda Barnett, our General Manager of Animal Services.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Wale Oyewole. Controller issued a report on the Animal Services fiscal operations on February 15, 2012. The report included 49 recommendations. The primary objective of this audit was to evaluate the department's overall control environment. Specifically, we evaluated whether the department has adequate controls in place to mitigate the risk associated with its fiscal processes, including revenue collections and billing, payroll and time keeping, donation, accounting, purchases, animal inventory management, and contracting. Our evaluation found inadequate controls over several financial activities at the department, including revenue collection, contract monitoring, and inventory tracking. And I'll just briefly go into each one of those, a few of the key findings in our report. Number one, dog licensing. Our audit found that the department does not bill all dog licenses, all dog owners in its database for licensing, which we believe contributed to a decrease in license renewals. Using 2007 and 2007-2008 data as a baseline, our analysis showed that this practice contributed to approximately $1.3 million in potential lost licensing revenue for 2 fiscal years. Further, the department has not fully utilized several available methods that are available to increase the number of licensed dogs in the city. These methods include obtaining dog sales information from pet stores and breeders, obtaining information from vets who provided spay and neuter surgeries, subsidized by the city. Increasing dog license would help increase revenue as well as better ensure the health, safety, and welfare of animals and residents. Another finding has to do with the microchips, accounting for microchips. The city municipal code required the department to implant electronic ID devices, also called the microchips, into dogs and cats that are being adopted from city shelters. Each chip has a unique number that's registered with a national database, along with the pet owner's address and phone number. The microchip information is used to help reunite lost pets with their owners. The department charges $15 for a microchip as part of an adoption fee, and owners can also request a microchip for existing pet for a fee of $25 per microchip. We analyzed 2 years worth of data, and we found a discrepancy of $125,000 between actual revenue generated based on the number of microchips that were implanted compared to the number that was actually reported. With respect to contracting, the department has contract with 3 in-house vets to provide medical services on site at 4 of the shelters. We noted that the contract, while the nature of the scope and services required are the same, revenue sharing vary. Revenue sharing terms varies. And also, the department failed to collect at least approximately $41,000 of its share of revenue from the clinic operators. With respect to timekeeping, the department doesn't have a standardized method to track employees' worked hours to ensure they are paid accurately. Because the shelters operate on a 24-hour basis, there's a need for continuous coverage, and this often causes complex scheduling and variance reporting. Poor controls over tracking of employees' actual time worked could result in inaccurate payment to employees. We also noticed some issues with respect to how temporary bonuses have been tracked. With respect to the animal inventory, in order to ensure accountability for animals at each shelter, the department required the ACTs, these are the staff at the shelters, to conduct inventories on a daily basis, at least once a day. And variances noted should be compared, variances between fiscal counts and should be compared to the system. So that any discrepancies can be investigated immediately. We noted that staff were not consistently performing those daily inventories as required. The report included 49 recommendations, and the department cooperated with us while we were in there. The department agreed with all the report's findings, and they started implementing several of the recommendations before the audit concluded. Also, after the audit, the department submitted an official action plan, which we're pretty satisfied with. Based on evaluation of the action plan that the department submitted, 37 recommendations are either completed or in progress. And the department indicated that through the combination of some of the changes that they've made and the recommendation from this audit, they expect the current fiscal year revenue to be significantly higher than prior year. So the department may be able to go further into some of the things that they've been doing.
Thank you. Ms. Barnett, if you'd like to.
Thank you. Brenda Barnett, General Manager, Los Angeles Animal Services. First, we're very grateful to have had the opportunity to have this audit. I had actually requested an audit soon after I started work just to help me know what we were dealing with and to have a bit of a roadmap and a plan for going forward. So we were really grateful to have the opportunity to work with the audit team. They were very good, very helpful, and very instructive. We don't really disagree with their findings. There are a few things that I think are hard to really track, such as the number of microchips. That was potentially a big item. The way the microchips come packed and the way they were distributed in the shelters, we can't really verify that we have had the kind of loss that's possible, but what we have done is we've looked at things like when we put out the new RFP, we're going to ask for the microchips to be numbered sequentially. I'm not sure that's possible, but we do know that there are companies that will box them in smaller boxes so that we can have a better, tighter inventory. So that's one of the things. One of the other items I think that's noteworthy is the fees that were not being collected from some of the contract veterinarians, that $40,000 to $41,000. And those veterinarians have been notified that there was an error on our part of not collecting that, and we are in the process of working with them to collect that and get that back into the funds on our side, as we are still in contract with all of those people, with all those same veterinarians. So I think those are the two highlights that I would mention. I mean, again, we're grateful for the help and the guideline. I feel like I was brought here at some levels to make some reforms within the department, and one of the big things is to put the systems in place to run the department like a real business and a real operation, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. I suggest we go audit by audit, as I suggested in the same direction as the executive summary. So starting with audit finding by finding. On audit finding number 1, has the department taken steps now to send renewal notices to all pet owners, including the ones that didn't file, to at least confirm whether or not they still own their animal and to get them to renew if they have?
That's what we're waiting for the city attorney's paper. Go ahead.
No.
Okay.
Let me take it. Good afternoon, John Chavez with the Animal Services Department. Yes, Councilman, we are working on number 1. We're looking at various options of reaching out to license owners from prior years, including the use of postcards, which might be a more effective way of sending that information out. So we are working on that. As you can see there, we still have a couple of months to go, we think, before we can finalize a particular recommendation.
And will we go back at least a couple of years and try to ascertain whether people still have their animals, whether they've gotten new animals that aren't licensed, et cetera?
I think we'll go back at least 3 years. There's been some talk about how do you find out if an animal is deceased. I think when they're with as many people as there are and as many licenses, it's probably not practical to go door to door, but we can certainly contact the people and find, by postcard.
Can we have them send back a response postcard, presumably, with some checkoff boxes or something else simple so we can actually get the information?
We can, and we can also put something, we can do the kind of card that would have a reply if the person's no longer at that address, which might also be important.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hit a number of those. I think the department mentioned that it's going to be purchasing a new program to replace the Chameleon program. What does that program do, and what would the replacement program be like if indeed you do replacement?
Well, we've had several meetings, and I have not sat in on all of them because I'm not necessarily our top IT person, but it's a system that has been widely recommended nationally by other agencies similar to ours. I'm a member of the Society for Animal Welfare Administrators, and there's a listserv, and there's recently been a big conversation on that about what's the best database to use. And a lot of people, it seems the predominant number, do like this Pet Point. They also like second place is Chameleon, and third place is Shelter Buddy. I think what we'll be doing is going to the Animal Welfare Commission, asking permission to put out an RFP, because we understand that there will have to be a competitive bidding process. But this system is a little bit more flexible. For example, our officers in the field, because it is web-based, our officers would be able with smartphones to look up information about dogs they find or pets that have microchips or licenses when they're in the field. They may be able to take them home rather than back to the shelter. It's just an easier system to use. The people who have tested it have found that it's an easier system to use.
Yeah, that sounds much better, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the idea of new penalty enforcement, what are we looking at in terms of greater enforcement to get people to comply with this?
Well, we've been, in terms of just tracking down the people who have dogs without licenses or dogs who have not been spayed or neutered, we've had a very wonderful response from the community who's been sending us names and addresses, if not names, at least addresses of where they see unlicensed dogs that they suspect are unaltered. And our officers have been doing a great job of going out and checking on and citing the people and then following up and going back and making sure they're getting spayed or neutered. That's a partial, solution to that.
Very good. Mr. Zine?
Well, I will be very candid. The department has been a mess for a long time, and hopefully you can get it back in order. Coming from the police department, we have supervisors that do audits that make sure that things aren't missing. When I look at this audit by the controller, it says that the it shows so many problems. I mean, you can just throw it up in the air and find out which problem surpasses the other problem. It is, all the audits that I've seen in my 10 years here, I've never seen one that has so many discrepancies. So I'm not going to blame you, but as a general manager, you can implement anything and everything you want to do, and if the folks don't want to comply, then they can find some other department to work with. But when you look at the number of items, I mean, it goes on and on and on. For example, why did we discontinue the billing practice? Who decided to stop the billing practice? Obviously before you got here. Arbitrarily, let's just stop it. And then the enforcement, I know that we're not going to get more personnel, so when we talk about enforcement, who's going to do the enforcement? We pass all the laws, but it has to go hand in hand. So I don't want to belabor by going through each and every one. What I'd like to see is what you implement based upon this. And my preference would be to come back in 4, 5, 6 months and see where we are as far as implementation of these process, because we can talk about everything that's been wrong prior to your arrival, because the general manager of that department really let it run amok. And this is reflective of what's happened. So not only losing the money, not only continuing what they need to continue to maintain a department with personnel and standards and practices, but it's really been basically one failed general manager after another, and it's like, it just, the snowball. It grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, and now it fell apart, and now we want to hopefully put it back together. So my preference would be to see, because it's going to take some time to come online to make these changes, but the employees have to be accountable, held responsible. The managers, the supervisors you have to be held accountable, responsible. And it just seems that, like a ship at sea, it was just floating around, and there was no direction where they were going to land. So when I look at this, and the number of items where they showed problems, and these problems obviously happened over a long period of time and continued, and it was just until the controller's audit reflected that, hey, you know what, this thing's really out of control. So what I'd like to see is, since it's been a short time since the audit came to light, to give you an opportunity to implement, to make some changes, to include whatever you want to include as far as tightening up the ship, and then come back to the committee, this joint committee, to say, okay, this is where we are now. Because we really need to move forward in an aggressive fashion, not only with the money that needs to be collected, but the management of the operation, with the supervisors that you have, and whether they need additional training or remedial courses or something. But there seems to be just a long history, which I find extremely frustrating. So I don't want to go through each one personally. I think that we should give an opportunity to make those changes, and whatever my colleagues wish to do. But I want to see a follow-up to see where we are from that.
Yeah, I'm still going to ask that we walk through this
Okay.
and go through finding by finding. And I was going to suggest that the PA committee hear this on a quarterly basis until we feel the department is resolved. If you want, we can include the audits committee and do a joint meeting quarterly.
We can do that.
Subject, or just do it in our.
I think it gives timelines, because we serve on both committees. I think it serves timelines to give you the opportunity to make those changes that obviously need to be changed.
But they have made some. They're not starting from today. They've made some progress in a lot of these areas. So I think we can ask them some questions in fairness.
Okay.
They'll,
Yeah. Okay.
they'll have made some progress already. Mr. Rosendahl?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Brenda, thank you for your leadership. You've done a great job, and I appreciate your opening comment about wanting an audit done so you could get a fix on where things are at. That's obviously a smart move. On this very first point on page 24, where it says the department has lost the opportunity to collect over $1.3 million in potential revenues over the last 2 years as a result of not sending renewal notices to all registered dog owners, and then the bold print says, all pet owners who failed to pay the most recent year's bill were dropped from any future billing. Obviously, that all should be tacked on, and a new bill should go out and say you owe X dollars for X number of years. So are you going in that direction?
Yes, that's the postcard that John was referring to, that would be probably cheaper than a letter, but I think that we can put right on there what your bill is to date on that particular animal who's lapsed.
And are you able then to put a little note after that, that failure to do this would be da-da-da-da?
Yes.
Okay, so that's how you're going to get it out?
I think the truth is that the penalty is a little bit tricky because we're not really one of the pilots with the ACES program.
Yeah.
So we are working with the controller's office to try to come up with some way that we may be able to do something with the penalties before we become part of that official program.
I think it's a great point, too, and I think that if people have a warning, we get a lot of bills in the mail all the time, and some of the times you just tear it up and not knowing it was a bill or another come-on for something. So that does happen to people legitimately, so I would certainly give them a little bit of a grace period on that, and then let them know if they don't respond by X day or time, they would get nailed on that. But for me, obviously, my bigger question has always been getting people to register their dogs anyhow ahead of time up front. You and I have talked about the DWP tracking mechanism. They do know when they're coming to my neighborhood for me to keep the dog inside. They're very clear about it. The gas company does the same thing, and we put the notice up, and the dog reads, and so the dog disappears. No, but do you take advantage of both the gas company and DWP in helping us organize a strategy to get more registered?
We did get the DWP list. It's been probably maybe a year ago, and it was not in a format that we could use, but they were very good. They worked with our IT supervisor, and we did get a format that we could use. And then when we did a little pilot program to increase license sales, we used those addresses. So we do have that information now, and we can utilize it.
Have you gone a step further and maybe talked to them about putting something in their bill? Get a DWP bill, a simple enough thing that says, attention, those of you who own dogs, blah, 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 they should...
We put one in for the amnesty to get your license during the amnesty period. John was able to negotiate that, and actually they did it for free.
Yes, we did get an announcement in the DWP mailer early January, ran for about 3 weeks or so. We even put something in the employees' paychecks in January as well, encouraging people to license their dogs.
And any sensing of how that's all going, that campaign?
I think we will, in about 10 days, we should probably have the numbers on that because the amnesty period just ended the 31st, and we should be able to report back and compare to this time last year and know what difference that made. Certainly we had a lot of publicity generated by found animals as well as trying to do some things ourselves.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Alarcon, any questions on this finding?
Just, first of all, let me say, I just had a extensive meeting with the department, and recognizing it's actually indicated in the report, not directly, but sort of implied, and that is the capturing of registration for horses. And so I met with the department to talk about some things we might do and some motions that I'm intending to implement. So first I want to thank the department for being open and receptive to the idea of improving how we identify horses throughout the city of Los Angeles. The bottom line is we are collecting licensing fees for probably less than 10% of the horses that are in Los Angeles, and we're losing a lot of revenue as a result. That revenue then goes to horse trails and can be used theoretically for other things too, if we put our minds to it. But there's been a sort of quiet neglect of that issue, and it also has undermined our system of development or community planning, in the sense of by not identifying horses, developers have taken advantage of that opportunity to overdevelop areas that are friendly to the equestrian nature of the community. So it's a serious problem that I want to deal with, and certainly with the redistricting proposals taking on Shadow Hills, Sullivan, Tahunga, and other parts of Lakeview Terrace where there's a high concentration of horses, that's something that I will be working with the department on, and I'm very pleased to say that we had a very good meeting in that regard. One of this is the Animal Regulations Department, and one of the key indicators of whether we're regulating animals effectively is the extent to which we are putting animals down and destroying animals in our shelters. And yet the report doesn't really get into the subject of our desire to become a no-kill city. And I'm curious why the audit did not incorporate that issue in it. When it's the Animal Regulations Department, and if we're killing thousands of animals, that seems to be an indication we're not regulating very well.
Rick Degucci, Controller's Office. Our audit, as indicated in the scope of the audit, was to focus on the financial areas, and that's what we focused our attention on.
Okay, so we're supposed to we're supposed to infer that if we're not collecting fees, it's undermining our primary. I mean, I don't know how to say this, but the primary policy agenda under this administration was to move us closer to a no-kill city. And the audit doesn't really get to that, whether it be in fiscal terms or management terms. If it's not a management audit, then I want to know fiscally, how are we doing on that score? How much is it costing us to kill animals versus not killing animals? I mean, there's no analysis there. So so these sort of these issues, the issues that are raised by the audit, are sort of dancing around the elephant in the room.
Farid Safar with Controller's Office. As Rick Degucci was mentioning, our focus was to look at the fundamental financial controls within the department. There are many areas of operational efficiency, looking at program effectiveness. That was not part of our scope. We decided just to focus on fiscal operations.
Mm-hmm. But are there any implications that we can derive from the findings that are indicative of problems with our policies?
Policies with regard to operational efficiencies.
With regard to the no-kill policy?
Yeah, we did not evaluate that.
Mm-hmm.
We emphasize on fundamental controls, internal controls in place to make sure first the organization has basic foundation to operate. Fiscal health, in terms of making sure monies are accounted for, revenues are accounted for, expenses are accounted for, basic inventory controls are in place, and so on. Looking at program efficiencies and effectiveness is what we call a performance audit. And we did not emphasize nor include it in our scope of the audit.
Okay, with regard to the spay and neuter program and the new requirement that your animals be spayed or neutered, what were your findings?
In the specific program,
from a fiscal perspective.
We look at from revenue collection, where the department is billing all the revenues they're supposed to bill, collecting all the fees they're supposed to collect, and based on that, we identify deficiencies in the process. Not specifically for spay and neuter, overall financial activity or billing practice or collection practices of the department.
Okay, so I just want to make it clear that that because this is a fiscal audit as opposed to a management audit, it's really not. How do I say this? This isn't the document that really gets to the heart of the policy decisions that we make. That I think Mr. Koretz in particular has championed with regard to no-kill policy, with regard to implementing spay and neuter, the adoption services. It's important, I mean, but I would rather look at these things from the perspective of how we're doing in terms of regulating, our policies, and I'm not getting that from this report. It's not to diminish the intent of the report, but to say in terms of how useful it is for my policy considered, my desires to improve the department, the problems that we had with the general managers were more related to policy considerations than they were to fiscal considerations, quite frankly. In fact, the last two general managers, I think, had issues related to policy implementation, not fiscal. So this sort of deflects from that to some degree, and I want to get us back on focus to the policy. With regard to the equestrians, did you look at the licensing for the equestrians? For the horses?
No, we did not look at licensing.
Is there a reason why we didn't do that?
Well,
I know audits use samples, but...
Yeah, in terms of, again, once we started this audit, what we call is take a look at the very fundamental financial processes in place.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes, but
I mean,
without getting...
The fact that we only register, less than 10% of our horses.
Yeah, we register very few number of dogs, too, in terms of...
I'm sorry, what?
Very few in terms of dog licensing. The population of dog license is about 110,000. Yet we know there are about 1 million, maybe dogs out there in city of LA that we are not licensing at this time. Again, the emphasis was take a look at in terms of basic, fundamental financial processes in place. Before department can prosper in the operational efficiency, they need to have a foundation in terms of making sure all the monies are accounted for, all controls, basic controls are in place. Once they have that, then they can take a look at, more effectiveness in the operation. The audit that you are referring to, as I refer to it as a performance audit, is an audit that has a different scope than this, that they would look at with the assumption that basic controls are in place, then we are now going to look at spay and neuter program. In fact, we did a spay and neuter program a few years ago.
Right.
Other adoptions we did a few years ago. But in this particular audit, concerns were on fiscal health, and that's what the controller focused on.
Well, I am particularly focused on equestrians right now, and maybe this is my picky-uni issue. But it seems to me that it's easier to find horses out there than it is to find every dog out there. And it seems that in terms of performance and success rate, we would probably be able to accelerate our horse registrations if we put a little more focus on it. Easier because, it's pretty hard to hide a horse. You should be able to find it out there, and yet there has been no effort, and we're losing a lot of revenue that goes back into the. I believe that if we did a really good job, we could use that revenue to fund other programs, not just horse-related programs within the department, and I was disappointed that the report did not touch on the equestrian issue. And I've heard that we have as many as 90,000 horses in the city of Los Angeles, and I don't know where they get that figure, but I just think we could do a far better job of capturing.
That would be
those
excellent
licenses.
suggestion for department to have a program to look for this type of revenue opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
And I think a good suggestion, since we want to come back and work with the department on a quarterly basis, in addition to just the audit issues, we might ask the department to give us an update each time on where we stand on major programs like spay and neuter and reducing the number of euthanizations in the city.
I have a question. Who makes the decision what to audit?
Controller.
So the controller decides I want to audit horses or dogs or cats or this or that? So that's
Controller
strictly-
decides in terms of the scope and objective of the audit based on the recommendation from her professional staff,
Okay.
and she's the one who makes the decision.
Is the department consulted prior to that?
Department came over actually to us, and as General Manager was mentioning, they raised concern regarding fiscal health. And General Manager came in and discussed her concern in terms of,
So the focus was fiscal, not
Yeah.
anything else?
that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Moving to audit finding number 4. This one, I think, was largely discussed on microchipping. I just wonder, is there any possibility of accounting for the $125,000 discrepancy in revenue, or is that an impossibility looking backwards and just something to be corrected looking forwards?
You know, I'm not sure that, I don't think we can correct it looking sort of with hindsight. It's sort of, that's like the worst case number, and we couldn't wrap our sort of thought process around something to say, yes, it probably is that bad, or no, it wasn't. So we left it alone and started working forward on what we can do in the future to make sure we do have a good accounting. Do you have anything to add?
No, other than in terms of our microchips, we are improving our procedure when we receive the microchips, when we actually send them out into the shelters, and making sure that our veterinarians and veterinarian technicians are accounting for each microchip and also determining if we got some money for that microchip. So we're really trying to improve that process.
And when will the new microchip contract be in place, do we think?
Is that contract up?
Yes, our microchip contract is up this month. However, we talked a little bit about the animal database management system that we're going to go out to bid on. We believe that some of those bidders also provide microchipping as well. So we're going to hold off on going out to bid on the microchipping, because we may be able to strike a deal with a replacement to Chameleon, where we can get a good price not only on the animal management database system, but also on microchipping. So that's a little bit further down the road for us.
Very good. Any other questions on the microchipping piece?
No.
Anyone? Okay, next on the audit finding, number 15. What's a revenue sharing agreement? Why are there differences in the revenue sharing amount depending on the shelter to which a contract applies?
That came about, I believe, we may need someone from the CAO's office to answer this who was here before me, but I believe that when they put out the RFPs to get veterinarians into the spay-neuter clinics, that they didn't really have a lot of people respond to the RFPs, and then they ended up making individual arrangements the best they could to get people to operate the spay-neuter clinics.
And why wasn't the department collecting the amounts due?
That was an in-house technical error when they were, they didn't decide. There's a percentage, and so instead of billing it against each month, they were letting it run, and they weren't collecting it as they should. That was an accounting error that has been corrected, and the clinics have been notified that they will be charged back to repay that error.
And an ancillary question, I know at one point there was at least one vet that I got a lot of personal complaints about in terms of spay and neuter operations, and then needing thousands of dollars in follow-up operations once they had the animal. Are we doing more oversight of the vets that we contract with to make sure that they're all competent and not having these kinds of experiences?
We don't really have oversight over the veterinarians. That's a veterinary medical board situation. If we do get complaints from clients, we do go and talk to the veterinarian and try to find out what's going on and try to remedy the situation. But we don't really technically have oversight, but we do talk with them.
But we do refer people to certain vets, so if they're vets that we refer people to, we should do that with confidence, presumably. So we would have oversight in that sense. If we believe that someone's not doing the job, hopefully we would stop referring people to them for surgeries.
Okay, so are we talking about the veterinarians who take the vouchers, or are we talking about the clinics? I'm a little confused, I'm sorry.
I'm talking about, as I said, it's sort of an ancillary question, but where we have vets that do the spay and neuter surgeries that I believe are not in-house, but we have a close relationship with them, and we find that we're having problems. What are we doing about that?
Well,
Do we respond on a complaint basis? Do we do more careful oversight than that? Do we ignore complaints? And where are we on the continuum?
Well, there are situations. There's a situation right now going on with an operation that's being investigated by the Veterinary Medical Board because we have sent them information and they believed it was warranted an investigation. So, yes, we do try to follow up. First, we have to find out if it's something we can follow up that our Animal Cruelty Task Force can investigate, or if it's something that actually needs to go to the Veterinary Medical Board. It's not, we don't have oversight, but we can certainly not, and I believe whether we condone it or not, that staff is selective and refers to places that they believe that people are getting the best service.
Okay. Any other questions on in-house clinic operators?
Yep.
Mr. Stein, anyone? Okay. Audit finding number 8 on tracking employees' hours. I know the department has stated that new attendance and timekeeping policies were provided to all employees. Were unions part of the discussion in coming up with this fix?
That was a temporary fix that was put into place, so the unions will be involved. What we're doing right now is we have a consultant that the personnel department has hired who is working on 4 different policies. One is work schedules, FLSA, and overtime. The second one is attendance, rest and meal periods, and time off. The third is timekeeping and D-time, and the fourth is sick time and sick leave improvement. And she's drafting policies on those. We have, it will be an opportunity to meet with the union and get input on those before they're put into policy. Then it will probably take, once we have agreed that these are to be the policies, then we anticipate a 2-week training time on the staff, with the staff to implement them. So I think her draft proposal, she's a consultant who works 1 to 2 days a week, so we're probably another 6 to 8 weeks away from having her drafts, and then there'll be the meeting time with the union. So it's not resolved yet, but there's a path.
So to resolve the whole thing from start to end, what do we think, 3-4 months?
I hope 3 months, but some of it depends on how many conversations we have to agree that this is the policy.
And when the department disciplined staff who violated timekeeping policies, what was the response? Or was there a response?
Is there a policy?
Was there a policy? Did the department discipline staff?
We did, yes. We had 13 or 14 people, I can't remember, who did who were disciplined for time card questions. Most of those people were not totally, but almost exonerated because we didn't feel that they had had the proper training, and some of them had been given poor advice by their supervisors. Most of them ended up with a notice to correct. A couple of the supervisors ended up with I think it was 10 or 20 days. I can't swear to that, but I think it was 10 or 20 days suspension without pay in terms of punishment. No one was terminated over the D-time.
Okay. Any other questions on this?
What's the cost on the consultant?
Personnel department is supplying that, so I don't know.
Anyone here that has an answer to that question?
Yeah, she's right there.
Come on up.
I believe the consultant is a retired city employee who's come back on a 120-day arrangement, and she's done policies and procedures for our department as well.
The cost?
Your name for the record, too.
I'd have to get back to you on exactly the cost of that.
Is it coming out of the department budget or personnel budget?
Well, it's coming out of personnel because we're now one of the consolidated departments with personnel, so they're providing these services.
Gloria Sosa, Personnel Department.
To me, it just seems so basic that if you have a time card or a timesheet and you work 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours, I find that adults that work for the city where they have to do a consultant to figure out how people are supposed to document their hours, whether they're sick or vacation. My initial statement was the department was mismanaged for such a long period of time. I guess that's basic, elementary. And it really, I find it a tragedy that it went on for such a long period of time. It was, I want to work, I don't want to work, I want to show up, I don't want to show up. It's just, there were basically no controls. You inherited a ship without a captain and a mutiny on the crew. That's a good description.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
If I could, just on this tracking employee timekeeping, have we separated the word approval and timekeeping functions? Have they been fully separated and delegated to two different people?
Yes.
So that's how we resolve it. Okay, thanks.
Can I,
Please.
I with all due respect, I want to speak up for the employees of the department. I mean, they are some of the most passionate, committed people to the mission, to the general mission of helping animals. These are people who love animals. Although I would agree that there has become a sort of bureaucratic culture that undermines that mission, and I think what we need to do is root out that culture by establishing processes that in fact enhance the opportunities to give the workers an opportunity to do what they really want to do, is provide good services. And so, I mean, if the systems aren't working around the department, it undermines the culture. And so it's I don't want to. It sounded when you say a mutiny in the department, that may be a
No leader. Let's just say no leadership.
yeah. Well,
Maybe that's better.
I don't. All I want to say is that the department has problems, but I certainly don't want to say that these are people who don't care about animals. I mean, and it sounds like that when you say it like that, because I know they care very, very much.
My
They
own.
disagree a lot, but they care a lot.
No, my only issue was that management has the responsibility to make sure employees are doing the job, which they have to do, but to document their time. We're talking about the time accounting, that it's a basic, you work from certain hours, not questioning their dedication to animals, but I don't blame them for management not making sure that there's a checks and balance in place to make sure someone's accounting for it. That was the issue, not the lack of their respect or love for their job, but when no one's watching, no one's directing, there's no policy manual, you kind of do what you want to do.
I think it's a fair point, what I think both of you are getting at. It's pretty clear that some of the systems have historically been lacking, and that regardless of who the people were in place, without the proper systems, you're going to get a lot of these things fouling up, and certainly that seems to be the case.
Yeah.
Moving on to audit finding number 10.
You bouncing around these numbers or what?
Well, this is following the executive summary,
Okay.
so I'm trying to do that. And the problems between the system records and the physical count of animals. Has the department started to perform daily or regular depending on how many days inventory of impounded animals and what's the current status of impounded animals.
Well, that's one of the weaknesses with the Chameleon database, is the records can be corrected and changed. So that's one of the strong key reasons for wanting to go to a different kind of a database. We are trying as best we can to know who's there and how many spaces we have and how many openings we have. And almost any of our ACT supervisors, if you call them up and say, what is your count today, they're going to give it to you. They know. But there is some ability to change things within the Chameleon database.
And are there labor issues around this issue, and will the better tracking system with a better database help resolve those, or are there other areas that we need to look at?
Labor issues. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, we had a pretty big group of people doing some webinars and all to look at this other system, including one of our ACTs and a variety of people in different positions. But I think everyone who's looked at this system has sort of said, wow, this is better.
And how are we doing in terms of tracking animals in the foster program? I know there's in theory, a new foster tracking program that's been proposed. Has it been implemented, and if so, how's it working out?
Well, we have actually a very enthusiastic ACT supervisor who is working very hard to get the foster program where it should be. So far it has not, we don't have a lot of animals out in foster. I think some shelters are working harder at that than others, and some of that is just normal because the shelters are going to have some differences depending on where they are and what their clientele is. But I would say she's maybe within her first 6 weeks of really having this assignment, and I believe she's going to do a fantastic job. But I would say I don't have evidence to give you at this moment.
Okay. Any other questions on this item? Mr. Rosendahl?
If I could, yeah. Obviously, to keep a record is key, and to figure it out. Have we looked at other cities on how they keep an accurate, up-to-date inventory of their animals?
Yes, as I said, I'm a member of the Society for Animal Welfare Administrators, so that is a national and actually probably an international group of professionals, and we have a listserv that we get emails daily on a variety of topics, and I put a question out several weeks ago about databases, and got a lot of input from around the country of what seems to be the most popular, what people are finding to be the most functional. And I specifically always talk about not just sheltering, but also field work and field work where it's fairly expansive and the cell phones don't always work, et cetera.
What about the idea, for example, could a barcode be assigned to each animal so a staff member would simply have to scan the tag daily, which would then create a viable database entry?
Yes, we can do anything with enough money. There is actually someone working on that now in the community, and I don't know if he's actually working on something that will barcode an animal, but there is a private person working on something related that we would be possibly the test case if once he finishes the development. I think I'm not supposed to explain too much what he's doing because it's a secret.
I kind of get that. Okay. Thank you.
I mean, it seems like it would be something that would be costly in the beginning, but once we were actually putting it to use, it would save a lot of money and
Yes.
get
Like the
things to be
grocery
much more
stores.
accurate.
Yeah.
Exactly. Mr. Zion, any questions on this one? Okay. I think we pretty well covered the next one, finding number 2 on methods to increase the number of licensed dogs. I know there are a number of ideas from focusing on contact with stores, contact with breeders, DWP, gas company. Where are we on implementing all of them?
Well, we've done the putting notices in the the employee checks and the water bills. In terms of the pet stores, we've been brainstorming a little bit about that, and I think it should be just like our New Hope partners. If our New Hope partners don't send us their spay-neuter certificates every 30 days, then we stop them from being able to pull animals. So I think for the pet stores, if they don't send us their paperwork on a monthly basis, we should let them know that they won't be able to renew their permit to do business. I think we just need to set some expectations and hold people accountable. We are working with our permits people. We have 3 people who do permits plus a part-time clerk. So that's totally doable to do that.
Now, with DWP and gas company, do they keep a database of animals in people's homes? Because I know some entities provide stickers for the homes themselves. I have 1 dog, I have 2 cats. Fire department, for instance. Does anybody else other than Animal Services actually track animals being present in homes?
I don't have a total answer, because when Dara worked with that, I thought she had a specific reason to look at certain houses from the DWP bill, like there was some kind of indicator. Maybe it's just a warning to the person who reads the meter. There might be a dog here, but I would have to get you more information on that.
Because if indeed any of these entities have that information, that would obviously be a great roadmap for us.
Right. Yes.
Any other questions on this
I
one?
know the gas company does, because I received a lock from the gas company from my gate that they have access to come read the meter. So I know the gas company does, whether Water and Power does or not. But the Water and Power, the water meters in front, but the electric meters in the back. So I would assume both of them have that access, and they would have a record of who has the pet, so their personnel are safe. So we may be able to tap into that.
Yeah, it's certainly anything like that, we should be looking at that, because that would be, in addition to just getting the PR through their bills, if we really knew where the animal was, and they kept accurate records. We don't know how accurate either, but that's something that I think they should look into.
And there's another indicator on the horses, which John figured out, that the people who get the brown trash cans, it's an indicator that they have horses. So he now has a list of that we can work on for our horse license.
Right. Sanitation did share with us the addresses. There are about 450 addresses with the brown bins, so we're going to be looking at that just to license more horses.
And that's picked up by sanitation?
Yes.
And they pay an extra fee for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on that one? Okay. Audit finding number 3, that there are a number of businesses that didn't renew their permits. We attributed the lack of follow-up to lack of staffing resources. Have we developed any system to ensure that businesses comply with permit requirements and renewals?
We are working with the permitting people. When I figured out several months ago that they were using a rubber stamp to sign my signature, which really wasn't my signature, we changed that, and I've been hand signing all the permits, which gives me an opportunity to look at the date that they are applied for and the date that they're issued. So we have been shrinking the time between the time the person applies and the time they actually get their permit. So we have gained some efficiencies there. So we are starting just to work through that whole process.
Have you involved labor in any strategy sessions on how to do this most effectively?
No.
Do you think that would be a good idea?
Sure. Well, it's not exactly. We did have a number of meetings. I should take that back. We had a number of meetings with all of the union representatives and the stewards from the department over at one of the city personnel offices, and we called those meetings something like moving forward in a time of change. And we did have multiple meetings with all the representatives trying to sort of get on a basis. What we're doing now, rather than actually always involve the unions, every other Wednesday I have a WolfStat meeting with all of the lieutenants and the ACT supervisors, where we come in and we try to look at our statistics and what we're doing, and we're trying to learn how to use statistics and how to use the statistical information that we have to enlighten ourselves and to make decisions about how to best move forward. So we have a work group of our staff.
Have you included union representation in those?
Not in those.
Do you think it would be a good idea? Do you
Not
think
in
it's a good idea?
Not in those I wouldn't, but I'm certainly happy to meet with the union at any time, the union representatives.
I just think, not in terms of just dealing with purely union issues, but that they may also have some good strategy to offer. So I would probably encourage that to happen more often. So we have fewer labor issues, but we also get some other points of view on strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on this one?
No.
Audit finding number 5, related to adequate controls in the Chameleon system in terms of posting payment and making sure adoptions were processed with receipts, etc. Is this issue largely resolved, or is this still an ongoing issue?
I think the payment on the adoptions has been tightened up. The clerks have all had specific training from our chief accountant or someone in our accounting office and from admin to work with them on that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want, that's
No,
more your
that's,
purview.
no, that's okay. We're in compliance with that one, Councilman.
Okay. Any questions? This one? I don't think so. Audit finding number 7, there's a question about manual receipts and permits not being properly controlled, and that receipt books were missing, etc. What's the department done or is doing to correct the situation?
Those are the ones that I'm hand signing and tracking.
Great. And I know there's also been a problem with shelters not properly tracking donations that were received. This has gotten a little bit of press as well. What were the estimated amounts of cash donations that received this fiscal year? Do we have any idea?
255,000.
And were those donations used for anything other than what was specified by the donors?
No.
That we know of?
Okay. We set up sub-accounts if they specify a certain thing. Any donation goes into the Animal Welfare Trust Fund, and then if the donor specifies a certain amount, then it's designated. For example, we got one estate that had a portion of it designated strictly for the North Central Shelter, so that's being held in a sub-account until at some point we make a decision for something we want to do for North Central, and then we'll get permission from the Animal Welfare Commission to do that.
So someone could say, I want to donate $5,000 just to spay and neuter animals at the North Shelter, and then we would...
Correct. Right. We're getting some donations now, not a lot, but a few for, there was a movie that came out about the street dogs of South LA, and we've gotten a few donations that are specified for street dogs, for example, and our chief accountant makes a sub-account under the Animal Welfare Trust Fund for that.
Okay. Any other questions on this, or any of the others?
250,000
Yes.
donations? And how many folks was that? And over what period of time, do you know?
So you can come up to the microphone, give the information.
John Forland with the Department of Animal Services. The total number of donors is over 10,000 because we get so many small $1 and $2, $5 donations. We get some large ones, but it's a very large number of donors.
Do you keep a receipt or give them a receipt, be it $1 or $5,000?
We have a thank you notice we include for the small donors. If it's over a certain amount, I think $25, they'll get a special thank you. If it's over 100, they get a letter thank you.
They get letters for anything over 100, and if it's depending on how much over 100, they get a personal note.
And how do you deal with it being cash if they're giving you $1 or $2? I mean, how do you keep a record of that so
Every receipt,
comfortable?
even if it's whatever amount it is, every receipt indicates the amount that is the donation.
We discontinued having donation jars at the shelters and at the outreach mobile pet adoptions because we couldn't really account for them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Do we have any speakers from the audience? Any slips? Okay, the first speaker is Paul Zarigo, to be followed by Phyllis Dougherty.
Come on up. Here.
Good afternoon. I first want to apologize for my appearance. I feel like I'm underserved and I feel like I'm not dressed appropriately, but I think my words don't feel or weigh any less than what I'm about to say. The magic number for us to be zero kills, 2,000 animals a month. I've not heard it mentioned once. How are we going to measure what our goals are for this city if we don't know? We have to do it. That's why I've asked Councilman Koretz, Councilman Zine, and Alarcon that we have a review, obviously a review of the department's functionality. How are we doing with our statistics? And what we need to do to address the deficiencies of the department. Look, this department, we all know, is severely under-budgeted. We get it. This is a really big task. If you look at a lot of things that need to be accomplished, we understand. Brenda took on a big chunk to deal with. But we must stay true to the core, and we must all commit to zero kill. That's where it starts. The RACO program is 9 months behind schedule. The funds have not totally been identified yet. We know that they're in a fund account, but not put into a sub-account. I'm sure the money is there, but we just don't know. I've inquired about the money because I wanted to find out when the next class would start. I still go out to neighborhood councils. I got one today. Wilshire Korea is talking about it today. Downtown LA is talking about it today. I've readdressed where I go to neighborhood councils to address the ingestion of animals, which is south, east, north. I go to those neighborhood councils now to get them involved, asking for an animal liaison and to raise more money for RACO. I will visit all 95. I'm at 24 now. I've gone to about maybe 50 presentations so far or more. But I do request that we have a metrics review, simple things. How is our response time to animal calls? I know that one issue we had 3 to 4 hour wait time at the same location within a year. Now, again, I know there's issues that need to be worked out, but I do request that be done. Can I get an extension on my time?
I'll give you a few seconds.
Thank you. If we look at LAPD, you know that if we ask them how long it takes for them to respond, they can give us the data within a second. We need to do a better job of understanding what our metrics are, absolutely. And anytime you ask this department to take on new tasks, you must understand we don't have the money. If you don't have the money, that means you have to bring on volunteers or some other way of accomplishing that capacity. And in my work in film production and sales, I know that we need to do this by vigorously taking on the commitment. And I wish I had more time to talk, but I continue to support the department in my work, even though sometimes Brent and I don't see eye to eye, but I still support this department as much as I can, and I'm absolutely committed to zero kill. And thanks for your time.
Thank you. Phyllis?
All right. Thank you, Phyllis Dougherty. I'm going to speak bluntly to Mr. Zine in that the City Council has been aware of what's been going wrong in this department for many years. You've never asked for concrete figures, and you've never demanded that a general manager come in with any responses to the audits in the past that have been very similar to this audit. The attitude has been, tell us what we want to hear and get out of here. Nobody has demanded licensing. There are 1.2 million dogs out there at least. If we licensed 800,000 of them at $20 apiece, we've covered the budget, and it is not that hard. There are jurisdictions that do this. We're not going to do it with cards like this And we're not going to do it with the methods that they're speaking about today. This will barely pick up a small portion. The employees, the people that haven't licensed, what are we talking about, a couple of $100,000 when we're missing millions? But again, it diverts you away. And are you going to get back to asking the real questions that need to be asked about managing this department? The water and power bills are very complete. I mean, water and power lists are complete. They know all the animals. The gas company will not go into a piece of property that has more than 3 dogs. That's a policy they have. It's not written, but that's their policy. So, Lon, I want to tell you, no kill. I've got to tell you, no kill implies there's no problem, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot because we are telling people we are almost no kill, so why shouldn't you breed? Why shouldn't you just dump your animal? We have 90% pit bulls in every one of our shelters. Killing them is the cheapest thing we can do. Blue juice is a couple of cents. It's keeping them these long periods of time, and Best Friends is taking all of the desirable animals now, and they do not pay us a penny. Something else I want you to know, when you go over the responses of this department, we now have contract employees figuring out our purchasing, our microchip policy. We have found animals and the General Services Department are going to do our licensing. Public Works is doing personnel investigation. Personnel is doing personnel. PD is doing investigations. Payroll is being done by personnel, and General Services is going to send out the licenses. We have no problem. We have no program for an aggressive licensing or administrative sites, and we had all of this in place when Ms. Barnett came here, but she destroyed the system that was building. So you need to ask some very serious questions about dollars and cents and numbers. Where are we now before you just start asking for these reports in 3 or 4 months?
Thank you. Next speakers are Glenn Bailey, to be followed by Victor Gordo and Renee Anderson.
That's Councilman Gordo.
The Honorable Victor Gordo.
Honorable.
Good afternoon, council members. I wanted to focus on the financial parts of this that were... Glenn Bailey. As it relates to licensing, it was already mentioned, there's an uncertainty about if there's 1 million or 1.2 million dogs. There's uncertainty if the department has registered 35% or 15%. Why don't we know these numbers? But even at the worst case scenario, the department is leaving $12 million on the table that this city could otherwise generate every year in revenue. Mr. Rosenthal talks about gold in the gutter. This is $12 million that's not being collected for dog licenses. Also, I'm wondering, I hear complaints of people who do get notices, but their dog died. That's very sad, but is there any interface between when a dead animal is brought into the animal shelter to take them out of the database, or to veterinarians who put an animal down, interface to take them out of the database, so we're not spending money sending renewals to people who have already suffered a loss, and now to be reminded of that because they're getting a renewal notice. So I want to get renewal notices, but I don't want them being sent to people who've lost their animal. With regards to equine licenses, at a recent meeting of the Arts and Parks Committee that Mr. Alarcon chairs, it was stated that there were 90,000 horses in the city, and that every year 1,600 are licensed. That's less than 2%. At the current $14 rate, you are losing $1.2 million that could be used for equestrian programs because of that, assuming those numbers are correct. Also, dog licenses are $20, equestrian licenses are $14. Some representatives of the equestrian community said, $20 maybe put it on par with dogs may be acceptable to them if they knew the money was being used for the benefit of equestrians. Also, I'm pretty good online, and I've been to the Animal Services website, and I cannot for the life of me figure out how to get an equestrian license online. Maybe it's there, but it's so convoluted, hidden, that just a layperson cannot find on the website easily. Okay, that's the key, easily to be able to license their horse. It's on there clearly for dogs, but not for the horses. So, few suggestions.
You mentioned horses and dogs. How much is a cat license?
I don't know. Do they have one?
I don't believe we have them.
There's no cat license.
There's no cat license?
No.
I believe in West Hollywood, they have a voluntary cat license, something we could look at, but I would think we'd look at it after we have our act together on these other businesses.
I would second
But
that.
it is
What
something.
numbers, I just want to figure out.
It is something I actually would intend to suggest at some point.
Thank you.
Thanks. Victor Gordo?
Thank you, Mr.
Honorable.
Yes. Honorable Victor Gordo.
In another city.
Pasadena.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, is that right? Pasadena
And-
Councilman?
Correct.
We want to give you the prestige that you're notorious for.
The big city. Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. I'm here representing the Coalition of LA City Unions, and let me tell you that we are dismayed. We're dismayed to have a general manager sit before you and pretend that everything is okay. It's not. From top to bottom, this is a department that's in complete disarray. The employee morale is at an all-time low. Commissioners are abandoning ship between meetings, not showing up to a meeting to say, I've had a good time, this is a great department, but actually leaving between meetings. From top to bottom, this department is in disarray. The poor judgment that has been exercised time and again involving trees, missing animals, signs on private buildings, it just doesn't end. But what you really should be concerned about, besides the issue of labor relations, and let me just say that there are no labor relations in this department, zero. The issues that you should be concerned about are the serious policy considerations. The hearings, for example, have been moved from your districts to Fig Plaza. Your constituents are now having to come to hearings downtown at Fig Plaza to pay exorbitant parking prices. At Fig Plaza, for example, your constituents now pay between $20 and $30 to park and come to a hearing. How is that a policy consideration that you, as elected officials, can back? The gun policy. Guns were taken from officers. The purpose of those guns is to put down animals who need to be put down humanely. There was no plan. There was no plan to ensure that those animals were put down humanely. We were told, our membership was told, that a plan would be forthcoming. It never happened. Instead, you had animals dying slow deaths, which predictably we said would happen. Rather than come up with a comprehensive policy, you come up with a policy, Mr. Chair, if I may just finish my comment. Sure. You come up with a policy that says, now let's think this through. The purpose of the policy is to prevent all animals from dying slow deaths. The purpose of the policy is to prevent your constituents from having to witness that. So we get a policy after the fact that says, because 43% of the animals that need to be put to death are on the west side, from here forward, officers assigned to the west side will be allowed to carry weapons again. What's wrong with that policy? What's wrong with that policy is that 53% of the animals, the majority of the animals, are still dying slow deaths. And your constituents, those who aren't on the west side, are having to witness that. This is a department that's in complete disarray. These are policies that are affecting your constituents, the people you represent, and we will provide to you in writing a number of policy issues that we are concerned about that we ask this committee take up.
Thank you. Renee Anderson?
Renee Anderson, SEIU Local 721, representing the animal control officers and the animal care technicians. Victor is absolutely right. The morale is at an all-time low, while the discipline is at an all-time high. Councilmember Kalkaritz, you brought up the timekeeping issue. Those were my employees that were disciplined. We had 15 proposed terminations for the same classification of employees, all at the same shelter. The first thing I said when I picked up the Skelly packages is, how in the hell can you propose discipline termination for one class at one shelter? Who in the hell is going to do the work? I mean, the animal care technicians are the ones who feed, they clean the poo-poo, they're at the counter when the customers come. This was proposed termination for 15 of these people at one city shelter. Yes, she was correct. We tried meeting the unions and the department. We tried under Maggie Whalen's recommendation. And as you know, Local 721 has been excellent in Joint Labor Management Committee meetings. We established this back with Jackie Goldberg since 1998. We were hoping something happened. Nothing happened. Nothing was resolved. It was like we were totally ignored. We haven't met since probably September, October of last year. Yes, and we only did have 2 meetings. Good thing that you brought up about, are you going to consult with the unions about the timekeeping issue, because this has been out. My members has been calling me, ringing my phone, asking about this timekeeping. We have not heard from the department, so I'm kind of curious as when was the department finally going to call the union. It seems that they don't want to meet and confer with us. They feel that they do not have to meet and confer, and it's like Victor said, it's a problem here. Thank you.
All right, well, we appreciate the public comment. If there are no further
Well,
questions.
what I'm going to offer is for the commission, and I will send a letter to the commission that they are welcome to come and meet in the West Valley Municipal Building. We do have other sites around the city of Los Angeles where they shouldn't have to pay for parking, where the commissioners, I remember when we did have a meeting at the Van Nuys City Hall, a commission meeting, animal services, so I will, and my colleagues, Mr. Rosenthal, I know you have a facility in your district off of Santa Monica. You've got one off of Santa Monica also.
We have it on Pico.
What we can do is, my focus on it is, as far as this audit goes, to have the department come back and see what they've done to make some changes. And I stated originally that there's been a lot of problems with the department, and I don't know of any department in the city of Los Angeles that continually has problems. I was unaware that the employee problems were at the point they are. I came from a union background with the Police Protect League as a director. I've handled arbitrations, grievances, so I know when you don't have a happy workforce, you have a lot of problems. But as far as the commission goes, I will make a letter to the Animal Services Commission, welcome them to the 3rd District, and if my colleagues would do that, have those meetings in the districts, which I think would be more convenient for everyone. I don't know why they have to go at Fig Plaza. I didn't know they were having it at Fig Plaza, but they should be in the communities, and I have no problem taking the Audit and Government Efficiency Committee out to the community also. I think the more we do that, make it accessible to the people. Most people can't come down here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday or a Monday or a Friday, so I think we need to be more in tune with the community and their concerns, and this animal services is a major issue for a lot of people, and hopefully this joint committee can have some impact in making it a better situation. But I've seen, I think it's 6, if I'm not mistaken, general managers since I've been here in that department. That's a tremendous turnover, and it hasn't worked up to this point. That's a problem that we need to address and correct. That's all I have to say about this situation.
Rosenthal, do you have other questions?
Thanks very much also for that. Could I ask Jim Bickhart to come up on that note, representing the mayor's office, about the commission itself, how many commissioners there are, how many are left, what's the story with the changing commissionship? I know the mayor does the appointment, is my first big question. Then if the department could also help us with some of what I heard regarding properly, aggressively registering dogs and registering horses. We know there's revenue streams there as well. But if I could ask you, Jim, what has been the story with the commission?
Well, first, I'd like to correct the misimpression that Councilman Zine had. I believe Mr. Gordo was referring to hearings regarding barking dogs and dangerous dogs, which were formerly held in at one of the shelters, and very recently were moved to downtown for specific management reasons that the general manager can explain.
But let me ask why. Why wouldn't they do it in the district? Why wouldn't they do it convenient for the people?
Well, because they were being held in one district. They were being held at East Valley.
Okay.
And we had a hearing officer who was able to do 3 hearings a week with an assistant. And the staff there was being constantly bombarded with customers coming in mad because they were having to wait. So what we've done is we've put 2 hearing officers on the job. They're in Fig Plaza with one clerk to assist them, and we're doing 10 cases a week. And the parking at Fig Plaza is truly expensive, but there is street parking, metered parking, and there's $5 parking in it right there also.
Well, I think we should provide the citizens of Los Angeles who are paying taxes with free parking if they're coming down on a case. And
Okay, we can do that.
To them. And if I will open up the West Valley Municipal Building, if they wish to do them out there, we've got facilities out there we can accommodate, and there's no charge. I think it's an abuse when we charge taxpayers to come down and have a hearing and pay for parking. I don't care if it's metered parking at $4 an hour, which I think is one downtown, or $25.
Well, we can work out the parking, but I need to be able to manage the hearing officers and ensure that they're doing enough hearings, because many of you have called me about your constituents who are saying it's been 6 or 7 months and I've still got a barking dog next door. So we've tried to solve one problem, and obviously we've created a parking expense, but we can work around that one.
Okay.
And also, I wouldn't mind my West LA office or my Westchester office also being used as a...
It's really about being able to manage the hearing officers and the number of hearings that they hear so that we can not have such a backlog. They were 6 or 7 months behind.
But they get these requests from all over the city or certain areas?
All over the city.
Well, there's no reason why we can't have city facilities, since we have city facilities all over the city.
It's merely about managing the staff.
I understand. Are they paid staff, or are they?
Yes.
Okay, they're paid staff. They're on city payroll, city vehicle, or mileage reimbursement. Let them go to the people instead of people coming to them. We need to be more courteous towards the public. They're getting fed up with us anyway.
No, I'm not arguing with that, but I can tell you that when I had a hearing officer and a clerk out in a field office, they did 3 hearings a week. Now I've got 2 hearing officers, and we're getting 10 hearings a week while they're being supervised.
Okay, to go on in the commission, a note about having commission meetings in the field. In fact, the last scheduled commission meeting was intended to be held at the West Valley Shelter back on, I believe it was February 28th. Right after that, a couple of commissioners resigned, and we lost a quorum. So there's 2 commissioners right now. The mayor on Friday of last week completed the process of choosing 3 new commissioners, and they've all been submitted to the city clerk. And I believe at some point in the near future, Councilman Koretz and the PAW committee will have the opportunity to, process them, hopefully expeditiously, so the commission can be up and running again within a few weeks.
Hey, what about the other comment that I've been making for years, and it's not directed at the new general manager as much as it's the mayor's leadership, on getting dogs registered? I mean, for God's sake, there is a substantial gold in the gutter that I've used historically and other issues of that. Plus, of course, if the equestrian number is easy to get, obviously I'd like to make that $20. If you can afford a horse, you certainly can afford $20, you know? And see how we can generate more revenue, obviously, in the worst of times that we're in.
Well, I think the best answer to that is that the mayor's obviously supportive of exactly what you're talking about, and trying to support the department's efforts to expand licensing on every front that it needs to be expanded on, which is primarily dogs and horses. As I think Councilman Alarcon mentioned earlier in the hearing, he's in discussions with the general manager now about doing some revisions to the equestrian licensing program that hopefully will create not only more licenses but also more revenue to support the equestrian activities. As I understand it, the entirety of the revenue goes to support maintenance of equestrian trails and that kind of thing. Possibly an expansion of the licensing fee would also support the general fund, which then could be used to support the staff needed to expand licensing. So it's kind of a related thing.
How do we deal with the 2 union reps clearly saying that labor relations is in disarray or is not properly done and hasn't been? What's the mayor's office response to that?
Well, I'm not the mayor's
primary person on labor relations, but my observation of the situation is that for a number of years, there's been a certain tension there between the unions and this department relating to a couple of regimes of general managers, and we encourage the general manager, the current general manager, and hopefully the long-term general manager to do what she can to, be in better communication with the unions. I think at this particular moment in time, there are difficulties because there are various investigations going on driven by the personnel department, some of which in fact were inspired by findings in this audit that you're holding a hearing on today. And it's not easy to smooth everything over while that kind of thing is going on, and there is the specter of disciplinary actions and so on and so forth. But it's the mayor's belief that the department has to ultimately come to terms with its union relations, and frankly, the union has to come to terms with the department. It's a two-way street, and hopefully they will be able to meet and confer on the appropriate issues and have a better ongoing dialogue going forward.
How about the last point, which is the no-kill policy as a city? Obviously, to kill any animal has got to be the last resort. Do you have any sense of where we are on that today than where we were a couple of years ago?
Well, I think, frankly, the last couple of years we have not made progress, and the numbers of euthanasia have gone up a few percentage points, and that's, I think, to the dismay of everybody. I don't think it can be attributed to any one factor. There are a variety of things that contribute to it. I believe the general manager will probably have something to say about that in a second. My interpretation of it is that it's a combination of the economic factors that are causing people to relinquish their animals or release them in the streets. If you look at the statistics, the department statistics, the biggest increase of impounds in the shelters have come from strays, which suggests to me that people are just letting, people who are either being kicked out of their housing and they can't find new housing that allows them to keep pets, are just letting them go, or they're turning them in at the shelters and saying that they're strays, and we don't have the means to offer lie detector tests for everybody who turns in their animals. So it's a complicated equation, and the department has been doing, I believe, a Herculean task of trying to increase its adoptions at the same time that the impounds are going up, but the adoption increase isn't as high as the intake increase. So that's where they've fallen a little bit behind numerically.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that even though we are doing considerably more adoptions, the fact that we have a huge increase in the number of neonatal kittens coming in, and the fact that we have a big increase in the number of stray dogs coming in, we have not been able to get ahead of that curve. I believe if you look at the February numbers, it's probably the first time that we started to see a little bit of light. But it's, certainly with coming into kitten and puppy season, it would not be wise to assume that's a trend.
How much has the bird versus cat lawsuits impacted the number of additional kitten litters out there?
Well, the number of when that injunction hit, the number of neonatal kittens that came in and were killed went up 150%, something like from 2,000 to 7,000. But even with that, Jim's right that the largest percentage is the dogs.
And those are presumably largely because of the present economic situation.
That would be what, I've never ventured to guess as to why, but I would think that would certainly make sense. There are people that our staff will tell us that they drive up to a house and the dog jumps into the yard and practically goes and stands beside the person, but the dog is not licensed, it's not spayed or neutered, and the officer might say, "Is that your dog?" And the person might say no, because they know if they say yes, that they owe for a license, they owe for a spay neuter. There isn't probably, I would have to guess, an economic impact, yes.
Thank you. Any other comments by anybody?
You'll celebrate 2 years in July of 2012, correct?
August? Mm-hmm.
Okay. So hopefully we'll see some big improvements, but I would recommend that we do this every quarter, as you said, and keep an update on what's going on.
I think we will note and file the controller's audit and subsequent responses, and we'll ask for a quarterly report back, both on this and our planning and success with spay and neuter and with adoption rates.
Good.
And we're concluded?
With that, we are concluded with this item. The last thing we have are public comments, and we'll begin that with Phyllis Dougherty, to be followed by Frederick Jordan and Paul Zuniga.
Thank you for an opportunity to speak again, Phyllis Dougherty. I'm going to speak a little bit about the employees, Mr. Zine. No employee has been accused of grossly taking advantage of any aspect of the timing or anything like that. The problems that they addressed at that one time was some bad judgment in the way a supervisor did something. They all came back to work, but first they were told they were all going to be fired. And the department seems incapable of doing an investigation inside in the way that you would on a management issue. It has to be farmed out and everyone is put off work. We still have all of our captains off work. Instead, in our shelters, we may have, and you can imagine this with the police department. So you take out all of your captains, you basically defile them in the news and tell them that they cannot speak to each other, they cannot speak to anyone else, they are home, they are on administrative leave, we are paying them for $20 on the vending machines, and it was a policy that was in place. That's a policy that's just being changed now. Miss Barnett's been here a year and a half. She just discovered this problem. So they're taken out, and you have your desk clerks put up in charge of your shelters. That effectively is what's happening now. I mean, you're having kennel employees in charge of the shelters. That also is bad for morale. And no one has been accused of any really egregious crime. The problem, the only one that has really violated law is Miss Barnett in setting up this outside charity where she spent all of this time on it, diverting money away from the department to this pet shop that required $57,000 for the first 5 months to set up. And they are now getting donations. They are doing a few adoptions of West LA's best animals, taking them out of the shelter. We paid $154 million for these shelters to be friendly for people to come to. And they also must learn that the animals in shelters is not good. When you take them all out of the shelter like that, excuse me, I'll just finish that thought, and they see them only on the outside, they don't realize that when your animal goes to a shelter, it's not good. They think it's just finding a nice place to live.
Thank you. Frederick Jordan.
Yes, hello. My name is Frederick Jordan. I've been a citizen of the City of Los Angeles for 12 years. I'm a shop steward for 721, and I represent the harbor.
What's 721?
SCU,
SCIU. Shop. Okay. Local 721.
Yes. And I work out of the harbor, so I represent the harbor. And I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but I'm here today because we're going to be having in Watts, which is the 15th district, we're going to be having something super fantastic. We're going to be having vets coming to our community in the 15th district of the 3 zip codes, 900, 61, 02, and 59. We're going to be having rabies vaccinations given, licensing, and we're going to be having vet checks also for the community there. And it's all going to be for $20. We're going to be having radio stations there to promote this event. And I just want to make sure you're all aware of it, and we'd like to see you there if you're able to come down. I've worked South Los Angeles, West Los Angeles, and now I'm working the harbor. I worked for Mr. Rosenthal's area where he was out always at the parks. Whenever we had an event, he was always there promoting it. And The other thing I have concerns for, if you can look into it, is my shelter has awnings that protect the animals. They were put in when the shelter opened, but we didn't have anything there. That area gets very sunny, and when it rains, the citizens can't really walk through the shelters to view the animals. The animals are always getting wet. So Teresa Sardisco, who has come out and started Pedro Pet Pals, 501c. She's helped get us some of these funds to help get maybe a roof put over the dogs and over where the people can walk by. And my understanding is the bond measure still has finances for my shelter at the Harbor Shelter that might be able to be used for this roofing. And I'd also, before I leave, if I may, thank Richard Alarcon for coming out and standing up and appreciating the workers there for the City of LA for Animal Services. And thank you all for your time.
Are you an animal services employee?
Well, yes, I am. I'm an animal control officer. I've been so for 12 years now, going on 12 years. And like I said, I've worked South Los Angeles, West LA, and now the Harbor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Paul Dorigo.
Hi, I'm Paul Dorigo. Again, when we talk about what the issues are, it's euthanasia and loose dogs is a community issue. I think we can all agree to that. That to me tells me that we need to talk to the community. And we know that this department has no budgeting dollars for marketing. So how do you talk to a community if you don't do that? Well, now we have social media, which is working out quite well. I still think that we have 95 neighborhood councils, and they have a constituent list, and we all know, an email list. When I met with downtown LA yesterday, and I told them, as we discussed animal liaisons, I said, we really want to address the loose animals downtown. She goes, we don't have loose animals downtown. I said, yeah, we do. And she's like, no, we don't. I've been here 18 years. I said, well, I can show you where they are, and I could take you there if you'd like to see them. And she didn't believe it, but now she's aware of it, and now she knows. And they were very enthusiastic last night when I spoke at their meeting. They've approved us now for $1,500 for Racco, and they're going to bring on an animal liaison. So I'm saying that when I bring the message to the constituents, they love these two programs, especially, because now they're involved. Downtown LA has different issues than up in the hills. They have the dogs urinating in the buildings, and that people don't pick up. And of course, we have the dog packs. In some areas, we have the dog fighting and the breeding. We have to handle different issues differently because they all address different problems. The Animal Commission has not been effective. How long have they been in place? We can agree to this. They have not been effective. I wish they were. I've spoken to them many times, So I think we can agree to that, and that's again why I'm asking for a review committee to look at, again, we need the data. We need to look at the data and address this logically. How are our response times? How are our adoption rates? How are the adoption coordinators doing? How many phone calls do they make? How many animals do they place per day? We have to know that data. In any kind of sales company, we know, I'll finish in a second. Also setting customer expectations. When I worked for Apple Computer, they spent a lot of money when they designed those stores, and one of the big things they realized was setting customer expectation. That's why when you go to an Apple store, you get such an appeasable situation. People love going to the store. We as a shelter also have to work on that too, I think, would help handle the responses that we're getting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, and with that, we are adjourned.